In our gait analysis, we'll be focusing on 3 different observations across 3 different vantage points. From the posterior view, we're going to observe the angle between the foot and the thigh at max knee flexion of the swing limb. In the lateral view, we're going to observe the point of initial ground contact of the stance foot. Finally, in the anterior view, we are going to observe the placement of the foot contact relative to the midline. While walking with shoes on, you'll notice the performer has an observed asymmetry between the right foot and the left foot with respect to the angle between the foot and the thigh at max knee flexion of the swing limb. The right foot will leave the ground, and the angle will be greater than 10 degrees, meaning it turns further away from the midline, while the left foot stays closer to the midline at an angle that is less than 10 degrees. From this angle, we can observe what is taking place with the initial contact between the foot and the ground. If you watch each step closely, the first contact of the foot to the ground occurs with the heel. This pattern of foot strike does not change throughout the duration of the analysis. In observing the placement of the foot relative to the midline of the stance limb, we again notice an asymmetry taking place between the right foot and the left foot. While both feet initially make contact with the lateral border of the foot before pronating through weight bearing, the left foot has a greater angle between the sole of the foot and the ground compared to the right foot. Both feet make initial contact with angles greater than 10 degrees, however it is observed that the angle at initial contact of the left foot is greater than the right foot. While walking without shoes on, we'll observe that the right limb again has an angle between the foot and the thigh of the stance limb that is greater than 10 degrees, while the left limb has an angle between the foot and the thigh of less than 10 degrees. Throughout the entire analysis, there are times when the left limb has an angle between the foot and the thigh that is greater than 10 degrees. However, most of the time the angle is less than 10 degrees. While walking without shoes on, we'll notice that the pattern of foot strike does not change when compared to the with shoes on condition. Again, the performer makes initial ground contact with the heel of the foot. In this vantage point, pay close attention to your view of the arch of each foot. When the right foot is just about to make contact with the ground, the arch of that foot is not very observable. In contrast, just before the left foot contacts the ground, the observer can see the arch of the foot clearer. This again demonstrates the observed asymmetry between the initial contact angle of the sole of the foot to the ground. When the performer transitions into a moderate jog, we will see the same trend take place that we observed in the walking condition. At maximum knee flexion of the right limb, the angle between the foot and the thigh is greater than the same angle observed in the left limb. The angle for the right limb is greater than 10 degrees, while the angle of the left limb is less than 10 degrees. In the moderate jog condition observed from the lateral view, we see both feet making initial contact to the ground with the heel. It is observed, however, that compared to the walking condition, the initial ground contact appears to take place more towards the bottom of the heel, where while walking the foot made contact towards the back of the heel. In this view, we will again pay attention to the angle of the sole of the foot relative to the ground. During the moderate jog, we see the same difference in angles happening between the left foot and the right foot. As the left foot swings forward in preparation for ground contact, it is observed that additional plantar flexion occurs when compared to the right foot, so this may contribute to the asymmetry in foot angle. Interestingly, in this condition, it is observed that the angle between the foot and the thigh at maximum knee flexion of the left limb increases from previous conditions and exceeds 10 degrees. In this condition, both the right limb and the left limb have foot to thigh at maximum flexion angles of greater than 10 degrees. While jogging with shoes off, it is observed that initial ground contact of the foot to the ground occurs more towards the midfoot than towards the heel as previously observed. This pattern of midfoot contact occurs throughout the entire condition. This vantage point very noticeably demonstrates the asymmetry in initial contact angle of the foot to the ground. You'll notice the right limb swings forward and the foot makes contact to the ground with less than 10 degrees between the sole of the foot and the ground, while the left limb makes initial contact to the ground with an angle greater than 10 degrees between the sole of the foot and the ground. As the speed progresses to 8 miles per hour, both angles between the foot and the thigh at maximal knee flexion are beyond 10 degrees. The right foot appears to have a greater angle between the foot and the thigh at maximal knee flexion, which is consistent with the walking and jogging conditions. In the 8 mile per hour run, we observe there is an asymmetry in initial foot contact to the ground. Specifically, when the performer's left foot initially makes ground contact, the heel makes first contact, where on the right foot the contact occurs at the midfoot. We also note that the initial contact is taking place in front of the body on the left foot and closer to under the body on the right foot. In the 9 mile per hour run, both limbs have an angle between the foot and the thigh at maximal knee flexion greater than 10 degrees. Interestingly, in the left foot, the deviation from the midline corrects back to the middle before the foot recovers underneath the body, while in the right foot, the foot appears to still be angled away from the midline greater than 10 degrees. In the lateral view of the 9 mile per hour run, it is noted the same trend continues from the 8 mile per hour condition. That is, the right foot makes initial contact with the ground at midfoot, while the left foot contacts the ground in front of the body with the heel. However, it is noted that at 9 miles per hour, the right limb makes contact with the ground further along the heel towards midfoot, and the contact with the ground occurs closer to the body than observed during the 8 mile per hour condition. As observed during the 9 mile per hour run, both limbs have an angle that is greater than 10 degrees between the foot and the thigh at maximal knee flexion. It is noted that the right foot recovers towards the midline, similar to how the left foot does in this condition, which is the first time the right foot has recovered similar to the left foot. In the 10 mile per hour run, both feet are making initial contact with the ground at midfoot. This is specifically interesting for the left limb because this is the first condition where midfoot contact has occurred. It is also noted that both feet are contacting the ground at roughly the same spot under the participant. During the level 1 graded jog, the left foot has an angle between the foot and thigh that is less than 10 degrees at maximal knee flexion, where the right foot exceeds an angle of 10 degrees. In the lateral view of the 1.0 graded jog, it is observed that both feet make initial ground contact at the midfoot, slightly in front of the performer. As observed with less grade, the right limb angle between the foot and thigh exceeds 10 degrees at maximal knee flexion, while the left limb has an angle of less than 10 degrees at maximal knee flexion between the foot and thigh. During the 2.0 graded jog, both feet make initial ground contact with the midfoot and contact the ground closer to the body than the 1.0 graded condition. During the 3.0 graded jog, the same trend as observed without grade at the 1.0 grade and the 2.0 grade occurs. The right limb has an angle between the foot and thigh at maximal knee flexion that is greater than 10 degrees, while the left limb has an angle of less than 10 degrees between the foot and thigh at maximal knee flexion. In the lateral view of the 3.0 graded jog, the same trend as previously observed takes place. Both limbs make initial contact with the ground at midfoot, and both limbs make initial contact the closest to the body compared to the previously two graded conditions.
Our performer June's walking and running gait was influenced by whether he was wearing shoes or whether he was performing these tasks in his bare feet. What we had noticed was when June was walking and running in the first few trials with his shoes on, he showed a greater angle of dorsiflexion at the initial ground contact point compared to when he was walking and running without his shoes on. So ultimately, what we are trying to focus on here was when he was walking and running in his bare feet, he showed a greater angle of plantar flexion at this same initial ground contact point. And the reason why we think this is important is when we are walking and running with our shoes on, we are being provided with this extra layer of support and cushion for our feet, which helps to hide the impact forces that our body feel. Now, when we are walking and running without our shoes on, this protective layer that we have with our shoes is now taken away, so we don't have an external way to hide these forces. So now we must use our own bodies to help produce the forces that we feel. And how we do this is we activate more of the musculature in our feet to help decelerate our body as we're landing. So exactly with the work of our intrinsic muscles in our feet and our Achilles tendon, we are eccentrically loading a lot of these muscles to help reduce this impact as we strike the ground. After observing our performer June complete various running tasks, one thing we noticed was his speed had a direct influence on his running gait pattern. When we had asked June to run at greater speeds, he responded to this by having a greater maximum hip flexion angle when he was running. And the reason why this is important to our running speed is because the running speed is a product of our stride length and our cadence. So it is very important that we maximize our stride length as much as we can without sacrificing our running cadence. And the reason why our maximum hip flexion angle is important is because when we are running, the basis for our maximum stride length comes with hip flexion. If we do not have adequate hip flexion angle when we are running, we can only produce the greatest amount of stride length with our maximal knee extension. So I can show you what I mean by this. If we are running with a small hip flexion angle and our knee fully extended, we are only capable of running a stride length of this length that our leg is producing. Now, if we are running with a greater hip flexion angle and we fully extend our knee, we are capable now of running a greater stride length if we are propelling ourselves with our rear leg as the same force as we are if our hip flexion angle is at this smaller angle. One final observation that our group made about our performer June's running gait was his gait was influenced by the grade or the elevation of the surface that he was running on. When we required June to run on a higher grade or higher elevated surface, he adapted what is known as a forward trunk lean. The idea behind this is when you adapt this forward trunk lean, you are shifting your center of mass forward so it remains within your base of support as you are running up a hill. To illustrate this concept to our visual learners out here, we have first a case where this individual is running on a flat surface. So we can see here this individual has a base of support roughly within this area, and their center mass can be seen roughly through the middle of their body. And with their foot strike is going to be roughly within this base of support area. In our case number 2, what we see here is we have an individual who is running uphill and has adapted this forward trunk lean, as we can see here. So this individual has a base of support roughly within this area here, and because they have shifted their mass a bit forward, we can see it remains within their base of support, and their foot is still landing within their base of support there. Now, in our third case here, what we have is an individual who is running uphill or on a higher grade or higher elevated surface, and they have not adapted a forward trunk lean. So first we can start this by looking at their base of support. So roughly within the contact patch of this individual. Now we look, because they are leaning backwards, we notice their base of support, their center mass has shifted way further back. So we notice here this individual, their center mass is way outside of their base of support, and especially including their foot strike, they are being pushed too far outside the base of support. So without adapting this forward trunk lean, they will ultimately fall backwards. But on the same elevated surface as in case 2 and 3, if this person leans a bit forward, it pushes more of their mass forwards, and they are able to run up the hill while maintaining the same sort of hip flexion angle, knee extension angle, as you can see in these two cases, as well as the same plantar flexion angles in the rear foot here.